Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. What do you think about dumping a bunch of iron filings in the ocean? Um, I think that's a great idea, but not everybody's going to agree to that. And today I've brought on a person who's been thinking a lot about this. His name is Zachary Jacobson. He is a retired mathematician. He was trained as a physicist and then he became a psychological
And
mathematician
the mathematics. Okay, good, better.
and worked for Health Canada until he retired some time ago when he became very preoccupied with global warming, which I think everybody in the world should be. But he's learned quite a few things along the way and has some ideas about what we need to do to stop it. I keep talking to people who say, well, all we have to do is stop emissions. Well, yes, but we're not going to. And we're not, and even if we stopped right now, I think it's already too late. We have to do something more. So here's what we're going to discuss today. Hello, Zachary Jacobson.
How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Glad to be here.
Yes, I'm very glad you're here because I think we might even agree on a thing or two. Because every time I talk to somebody about global warming, they try to convince me that really all that we need to do is stop emissions.
Oh,
I don't
I
think,
wish.
wouldn't it be nice? Yeah, but
Yeah,
we have to do
yeah.
a lot more than that. And it's a very daunting thing. So give me your point of view. You have become very interested in this question. Let's start at the top. And what do you think about this issue?
Well, at the top, spoiler alert. I'm absolutely appalled at the rapid onset of the, shall I call it, the climate catastrophe. We're comfortable now, but in the lives of our grandchildren, my grandchildren, it will become desperate, I think, certainly their children. And I'm worried, frankly, about the loss of human life on this planet. That scares me, and I would rather it not happen. Um, I at least understand that that's at least part of the idea of going to Mars, but that may not work. I'd like to keep as much as I can. I'd like to keep living on this planet for the foreseeable future, and that's getting cloudy. So I think that um, I'd like to begin by actually showing, if I may, I'm going to go to the share screen now
Hmm.
and show at least one picture, and we may come back to another.
Okay, good idea.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Called a very, very useful graph. It starts by being the ice age cycle. This, by the way, comes from the by now classic 2015 paper by James Hansen. Well, it was published in 2016, but really the important the important versions were circulated pre-publication and a little more um, extremely by Hansen in 2015, just before the uh, Paris meeting. And I don't think he thought he had as much impact as he wanted to have. So look at this, the ice age cycle. On the top are the carbon dioxide concentrations as measured in ocean or deep ice cores in the Antarctic. And at the bottom, there are proxies also in the same ice cores for temperatures at the same time. It's like drilling down and looking at tree rings. Notice that the carbon dioxide and the um, the temperature have been running in lockstep for not quite a million years. That's as
Okay,
long
now
as the ice
see
cores.
if I can figure this out. The peaks are
Warm temperatures
warm temperatures.
and
The
high
bottom,
carbon
the troughs are
ice
ice
age.
age. Is that right?
We
So,
call it technically glaciations.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, okay, ice ages, ice
All
ages.
right.
A kilometer of ice above Manhattan, that kind of.
Yeah. Okay. Now, how long has this been going on? If you extended these graphs out in various directions, how long have this cycle been taking place? Because you can see it's really clear there. The bumps are, the peaks coincide, the troughs coincide pretty much. So, but how long has this been happening? A million
The
years?
the 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 almost perfect linear combination connection between carbon dioxide and temperature um, within epochs goes back millions of years, but there are some things that change. When all of the ice melts, for example, there's a different relation between temperature and carbon dioxide. I'd like to get away from that at least for this half hour.
Okay.
Um, the As long as there's ice and ice caps, this which has been just about a million years or so, uh, this degree holds. But look at the far right end. That's now.
Mm-hmm.
Current carbon dioxide concentrations spiked. They've spiked after 1880 or so. The steam revolution started to burn coal in earnest, and carbon dioxide has literally, and if we could take a look at the next slide, gone up almost exponentially since then, um, because of human activity. I don't think anybody seriously argues that this is anything but human activity now. And here I took this in 2014, 395 parts per million. Believe me, right now I had another graph that I spared at you. Yesterday or last Tuesday, it was 414 parts per million,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just skyrocketing up. Um, Back to the
And that,
first.
excuse me, but that temperature is constant. Where do they measure it? How do they know that there's one number that fits the whole world?
They don't. They have to guess. They have to guess. This is the climate at the pole at the time, and you get slightly different numbers if you measure in Greenland, but you don't have as long effect. You don't have a million years in Greenland to look at.
Mm.
So we just tend to use this as the Bible and the standard.
Okay.
The reason I show that, went back to here, is if you looked at what this kind of temperature, this kind of carbon dioxide concentration would mean if it really was driving, and we don't know that it is, but if it's really in driving the temperature as much as I say it is, we're talking about huge amounts of global warming. The difference between, I don't know if my arrow will show up here, between here and here, that was the last ice age, and then 11,000 years ago, and then up to here when it melted and human civilization seriously began in earnest. As I say, that's what Al Gore calls a mile of ice above Manhattan.
Yeah.
Um, and so now we're talking about a whole lot more of warming, and it will take some time for that to sink in. About 1.5 Celsius, I would say 1.5 Celsius of warming has come in since the year uh, 2000, I would guess, and and um, and that's about when IPCC started seriously looking at the temperatures. So because the greenhouse, you understand, the carbon dioxide is the major greenhouse gas, and that traps the heat from the sun, and that's what drives global warming. And it is proportional. The more carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere, the hotter the Earth gets. In about 100 or so years after you made the measurement of the carbon dioxide. You're frowning. I'm not sure.
Pardon?
You're frowning. I'm trying to find out
Oh
if that
no,
means
what I can't be smiling about this subject.
you.
There's nothing happy
Oh,
about it whatsoever. So excuse my frowns, but this is
no, no.
natural.
Oh, okay, no, fine. I thought it was skepticism on the idea.
Not at
Um,
all. I unfortunately it's all too familiar to me, but every time I see it, I go, woo.
you ought to.
Mhm.
That swooping curve going up is what they call the Keeling Curve, or what was originally called the hockey stick. It's real, and it's just desperate. So if you you have to draw that down. So the the best feeling that I can think of. Now there are plans. I know everybody's talking about direct air capture. Big fans bring in air, and they try to skim the carbon dioxide out of that, and then they extract the carbon from the carbon dioxide and turn it basically back into coal and sink it somewhere underground where we got it from in the first place.
Well, it's not coal. Carbon.
Well, it's like coal, coalish. It's straight carbon. That you could frown about. Okay, it's not perfectly coal, but yeah, it's the idea is once
Well,
upon
also there are places like, for example, David Keith, who works at Harvard. He's a big time Harvard professor. Has this operation.
everybody who works at Harvard is a big time professor.
No, I worked at Harvard and I was not big time. Okay, but he has this operation in, I think, Squamish, BC, where he's sucking this stuff out of the air and he makes it into a fuel.
Yeah.
Now, what that means is that it's carbon neutral. That is to say, what you put the energy in, and then you get this stuff out of the atmosphere, and then you can burn the fuel, which means it goes back into the atmosphere. But it's a closed cycle. That is, you're not adding additional carbon to the atmosphere, which is better than, well, it'd be lovely if he'd just bury it, but how would you get the money to run the operation? He thinks he can make it for $100 what is it?
$100 a ton.
A ton.
I believe that's what they're hoping for.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, okay. I've had other people think that that's not realistic, but it's having carbon neutral is better than nothing, but it'd be even better if we could just take the stuff and bury it. And
well, if you did that, and it would be the same process of extraction from the air, if you're talking about what's called direct air capture, that's
right.
I think the term for that. Then you don't need to make it. You don't need to make it into fuel. You could make it into solid pellets and bury them, or you could turn it into.
But the economics of it is such that who's going to pay to have this done unless you can sell it as fuel and make your money back out of it?
Exactly. I think it's even worse than that. I think it's energy inefficient because you need to put the amount of energy, as I was discussing before, you need to put at least the amount of energy you got out of the fuel when you burned it, all that fuel that you've been burning since locomotives started. Got to put all that energy back into the process somehow, And where's that going to come from? So that's an awful lot of solar arrays. I don't think we can do it, but I do. And you could, but even so, the argument is that if David Keith is right, let's give him $100 a ton. About $1 trillion for every part per million you take out of the air. We've got to take about 115, let's say 125 now. It's going to be 500 before we really start. So 200 parts per million of carbon dioxide out of the air, $100 a ton, about $200 trillion, which sounds like a lot of money. It is, and nobody's going to pay for it, except that if you don't spend it, civilization dies. Now, my hope and thought is it's a whole lot cheaper to put iron in the ocean and hope that slowly the phytoplankton, which this stimulates to grow, they get their energy from the sun, chlorophyll and all that stuff. They draw carbon dioxide, they spew out oxygen, they become carboniferous or carbonaceous, and they ultimately fall to the ocean. Once they fall below what's called the thermocline, then they just keep on falling. And as I like to say, they become sort of coal for the next epoch of fools to use. But in the meantime, that is carbon taken out of the atmosphere. But I think it would be, now, people who talk about it, Paul Butler, other people think that this would be Paul Butler and other people, he's been on your program, and other people think that this would be very fast. I think it would be fast, but slow. I think that the world would be heating up rapidly while this happened, and you would need to get some kind of a shield, an umbrella, at least temporarily while it was happening. And all of this imagines
Hold on. What a shield or umbrella for what? I'm really lost.
For the solar heat that keeps on coming in and keeps on warming us.
Oh, I see. So we've got to, it's going to take so long to have these phytoplankton remove significant amounts of carbon
That's my
from the
guess.
atmosphere.
Yes.
That otherwise we're continuing to increase the emissions, so that we would do something. We would need to have some additional thing, which would be what? Sulfur in the stratosphere?
Probably.
Okie doke. Go
No,
on.
nobody likes that idea. I find it. I never thought I'd say it was a good idea, but I don't know that we can avoid it.
I guess that's, I think all of us, when we get to the point of saying there's nothing else to do and we're sunk unless we do something, that's what drives us, maybe to the point of saying we have to consider that. And yes, there may be effects that we hadn't thought of, and they may not all be fun.
Of course, there absolutely will be effects we haven't thought of, but the effects that we have thought of, if we don't do it, are the end of us. Not to put too fine a point on it.
Okay, well, that's a cheery thought. Yeah. Okay, so what's going to happen? How much of this do we need, or what? I talked to Paul Beckwith. He's the one who sort of convinced me that this.
Oh, Paul Beckwith. I'm sorry I said Butler.
I know you said Butler.
I saw you being puzzled. My mistake. Paul Beckwith. Yes.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he's a big proponent.
Maybe that's why he's not answering my emails.
You've been calling him Butler. Okay. Well, he's a good person to talk to, because I think he's really on to this. He's really enthusiastic about it. Of course, you should, I don't know who would be the counter argument. There must be somebody out there who knows as much as he does, but who thinks it's a bad idea. I don't know.
Oh, gazillions of people think it's a bad idea.
But
believe me, you won't have any trouble finding them.
Well, I know. You know, even the word geoengineering, which this is, you have to admit
I try to call it climate restoration for that very reason. Geoengineering's got to be a bad word.
well, okay. But now look, there are things that can be done that are not as drastic or are not departures from things that human beings have already been doing. I mean, sprinkling filings in the ocean is something, a novel thing, and you know, you're going to expect shocking results. Whatever happens, it's going to be a big surprise because it's never been.
Volcanic ash in the ocean happens all the time.
Well, okay, but not on the scale we're talking about. But now
No.
let's talk about plants, because if you have enough trees and it takes a while to grow them, and if you do your farming right, because all of the farm, about 30, I may be making this up, but I think I read it was 30% of the atmospheric CO2, that the excessive atmospheric CO2 came from just bad farming practices.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So what we have to do is reverse that, do not only better farming practices that stop emitting carbon from the soil into the atmosphere, but that the kind that actually absorb it. And there is a move, well, there are lots of different moves for regenerative farming and regenerative grazing, which will restore the grasslands. And grasslands are even more, occupy even more of the world's territory than forests do. So there are various moves to do that, but the French government started something a few years ago at COP21, I think, where they introduced this thing called 4 per 1,000. And they proposed that farmers everywhere should change their farming methods such that every year they get not 4%, but 4 per 1,000 more carbon into the soil than the year before. So if they do that, and I was reading yesterday in the Drawdown book, which is as good a source of numbers as I know of. Maybe there are better places, but this was a guy sort of cooling the idea, because, or a person who wrote it, I don't know who it was, male or female, but he was saying, look, we've oversold the idea that agriculture is going to be adequate to completely reverse global warming.
I'm afraid that's true.
That's not possible. So let's not go ahead talking as if it were. But he said, what you can do is if we did it right, we could offset 2 to 5 years of emissions at the rate we're emitting them now. We could sequester as much carbon as we are emitting in between 2 and 5 years of current levels. Well, that's not insignificant.
No, it's not insignificant.
2 to 5 years. Besides which, this is not something that is being proposed as a lighthearted experiment. This is something that is required anyway, even whether or not we even had global warming to worry about. The point is that the world's soil is being depleted and wrecked at a terrible rate, such that you mentioned Jim Hansen. Jim Hansen had just approved of and endorsed a paper when I read about it a year or so ago, stating that within 60 years, the world's soil would be so depleted at the rate we're going that we won't be able to feed the human population. Mm-hmm. Now, that means the only way to do that is put that carbon back in the soil. So before I get to the iron filings, I'm out there talking to farmers, man. That's where we need to start.
Well, that absolutely. I wouldn't say you shouldn't do it. Absolutely. But you put your finger on when you said in 3 or 4 years we can take out as much as we put in now. Well, first of all, we've obviously got to stop putting it in now
No,
anyway, and that's
right.
not the easiest thing in the world to do politically, as you must know.
Mhm.
What was it last week or so? The Canadian government tripled the what do I call them, the bonuses, the the uh, the financial assistance to the fossil fuel companies, that
They
kind of
did.
thing. There's a juggernaut to stop there, and I don't know how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
However, all I'm and I believe all of these things should be done. However, it's abundantly clear from the speeds and the vectors we're talking about that that will not do it by itself. Again, I'm thinking that neither do I actually think seeding the ocean will do it by itself. And that's why I'm thinking that there's going to need to be some kind of a desperate parachute too, and that's what I think of as the and there's all kinds of trouble with that, the sulfur in the atmosphere idea. But
Yeah.
there's some good ideas too. And this is another Paul Beckwith thing. Let's have um, let's have a little bit of sulfur in jet fuel, and as jets go high in the atmosphere, they sprinkle a little sulfur up there
Yeah.
and increase the Earth's albedo that way, painlessly.
Well, I did hear I don't know whether he said it or somebody recently mentioned that. I don't know whether that is an intervention that would be on the same scale as the idea of piping up,
No,
eh,
not quite so much, but at least it's a help. Actually, it might be about the same. I don't know. We don't. I haven't done the numbers. Uh, it might actually be of the same power as one or two changes to agriculture. Yeah,
mhm.
I mean, agriculture is one of the most inefficient things that we do.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
Yes, and we really need to. I would say I'm going to give that top priority. No, no, I'm in terms of urgency. There's something that you haven't mentioned yet, which is even higher priority and even scarier. I mean, if think you scared me, I got scared even worse a few weeks ago when Peter Wadham talked.
oh, that scared me. No, that scared me. But that's the one that convinced me. Up until now, I was going to say everybody can do all we need to do quite naturally with iron filings in the ocean, but Peter Wadham scared the hell out of me. Same talk,
Right.
and I was pretty much convinced that we've got to somehow shield the permafrost, and that's the Arctic, not even the Antarctic, the Arctic. Shield the permafrost, and I can't think of any way of doing that other than sulfur in the stratosphere.
Other
If you
than
know a
what?
better way,
Other
please.
than what?
Sulfur in the stratosphere.
Well, there's sulfur there. Sorry, there's iron salts. Now I don't know chemistry. I'm like
Uh,
high school chemistry was not my best subject, and it's been 70 years ago or more. Um, but um, so I don't understand what iron salts are, but Peter Wadham didn't want to talk about that. I asked him that there'd been a paper that I'd read recently saying that the solution maybe to the methane problem, which we haven't described yet, we ought to take the time to describe it, but that the solution might be iron salts, which somehow there's a chemical reaction which could bind the CO2 or something. Look, I didn't understand it then, and I wanted to Peter Wadham to talk about it, and he said, no, it's premature. He said,
it's certainly something I
it's
don't know,
so
but
early in the conversation that to talk about that as a potential solution, it's really too early to consider it. But it's not that he was ruling it out. I'm sure he hopes it's,
I'll be Googling it as soon as we're off here.
yeah, right. And he also talked about lateral, like fracking, that you can
Yeah.
maybe, drill sideways in methane deposits in the Arctic. We should tell people what we're talking about, because unless they listen to Peter, no interview I
I
did
think
with him 2 weeks ago or so. He's an expert on the Arctic sea ice, basically. And it seems that the bottom of the ocean, the Arctic Ocean, contains large amounts of methane, and it's sealed in there by a layer of permafrost at the bottom of the ocean that somehow got slid in there during an ice age or something. So this lid keeps the methane down, but now there are perforations in that permafrost lids.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's under the water. That actually may be on the land, but that's
No,
been
it's
my
in
picture.
both.
But we know that we got a problem, and as the permafrost melts, methane escapes, and that's desperately bad.
Yeah, but it's both. It's both,
Well,
because
I know that. Yes, yes.
problem on the land is permafrost melting. Problem on the sea is permafrost puncturing, and
Or
it's
clathrates melting, I guess.
yeah, these clathrates, which are crystals of hydrogen and um, methane,
Yeah.
methane and water, really, that they come up and they're escaping. And methane is many times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2. Okay, so already we're having this stuff escape. But the thing is that because the depths of the ocean keep pressure, make it very heavy. So by the time the methane escapes in deep water, it's already absorbed in the ocean. By the time it gets to the surface, it's contained. But when you're talking about the East Siberian Sea, that's a shelf that could be just 30 meters deep in places. Large areas of the ocean are just an extension of the land before it drops off. And that in the shallow, by the time this methane is released and gets to the surface, it can escape, and does. And you can set it fire. You go along with a match on the ocean, you can burn this stuff. Okay. In fact, it'd be better to burn it than to leave it there, because
That's
then
right.
yeah,
Then you're merely producing carbon dioxide,
that's right.
which is bad, but not as bad as methane. Yes.
That's right. That's right. So let's say that this now the problem is there are big pockets of this stuff, and it could explode, and sometimes it does explode, and if 8% of it exploded and gushed out all at once, one calculation says that 1.4 degrees centigrade increase in the global temperature, which would be enough for sure to melt the other 92%, and then it'd be game over. This is an extinction event. So the question is how we do this, how we keep this from happening. To me, that's the most urgent problem of all right now.
And I absolutely agree. I don't know anything that I can point to other than solar geoengineering to keep that from happening. Now I'm going to look up iron salts. Absolutely, I will check it out. But it's not. I just admit to ignorance. It's nothing I've heard of.
Well, it's a new idea, and he said it's not ready to talk about. He didn't have,
Can you remember what journal you saw it in?
But he did mention the notion that see if we could capture this methane, we could do something, use it, or
they'll use it. But if we capture the methane, they'll use it as fuel. They'll burn it. Well, at least they'll burn it into carbon dioxide anyway.
Well, whatever we did with it, it would keep it from exploding if we could get it out. And the only thing conceivably that anybody's proposed, and it sounds like a far-fetched idea, I mean, Wadhams wasn't promoting the idea, but maybe something like a fracking operation where they can get down to the layer of the methane and then drill sideways so they can reach in various directions and extract it. Don't know.
I don't know. Absolutely don't know.
Yeah, we're in trouble.
Um,
We are in
I,
trouble.
I,
You got mad at me for frowning. Well, I'm sorry, but how are we going to end this show? I always like to end with something hopeful, but I don't have anything to say.
well, fracking sounds more hopeful than anything I've heard lately. Well, you're trying to get if I understand it, you're trying to get the methane out and
Yeah,
contain it.
yeah.
Maybe what, to turn it into ammonia, which could be, I don't
Oh,
know. I don't know the chemistry well enough.
I don't know it
Um,
at all. So there.
no,
Okay. Well, this is.
it's been a hoot, Meta.
I'd like to say it's been fun. Well, it's always
Well, I'm
enjoyable,
sorry about
but
that.
but it's but the subject matter is absolutely the least promising topic that I can think of, because we really have a problem, no doubt about it.
Oh
And
yeah,
all right,
the
thank you
first
very,
job
very
that,
much.
that was the first job. Convince everybody we got a major problem, and then deal with it. Listen, no, before you sign off,
Yeah.
two books. I think that the book I want to say Steve Jobs, no, the other guy, Bill Gates is going to turn out to be sort of the popular Bible on this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important that people read that, and I think he might turn out to have more impact just by the heft of being who he is than
That's
anybody
right.
else.
Yeah.
And also Elizabeth Colbert has written a good book called Under the White Sky.
How do you spell her surname?
Pardon?
Spell her surname. What's her last name?
K like Kilroy, Olbert.
Because I don't know that book. I do have
Okay.
some, Bill Fletcher, who gives talks on my show and did one last week, is going to review Bill Gates's book for Peace Magazine, but that's not going to be the April issue. Don't have room for it. It'll be the July issue. So by then, everybody will have read the book anyway, I expect.
You should definitely look up Elizabeth Colbert. And
Okay.
by the way, and she is almost universally pushing direct air capture and self. What she means by a white sky is what it'll look like when everybody puts something up in the atmosphere.
And she thinks that this direct air capture is going to work.
Not much. Well, she's hoping. I mean, everybody is hoping that it works slowly, and that the world is going to put in the $200 trillion it's going to take to.
But I think the thing that is not the probably as I say, the iron filing thing is not at the top of my priorities. Methane is at the top. Forestry and farming are at the next highest level of priority. And then I'd say the iron filing thing is maybe the next most promising thing. But the thing about that is it's so cheap. This stuff that you sprinkle, you don't have to sprinkle much. You and I, between the two of us, could buy enough of it to take care of half of the Atlantic Ocean.
Probably, yes. And Bill Gates could certainly do it.
And we could go out there and sneak around and sprinkle the stuff and not tell anybody. And I bet
let's not tell anybody. Let's just do it. I agree. Yeah. You'll get into so much trouble when they do find out. What was I going to say? Bill Gates is not that keen on planting trees, by the way. He says that they work pretty well in the tropical regions to draw and carbon dioxide out. In the Arctic, however, they absorb more sunlight by being dark.
Good for him.
Yeah.
I almost got, I tried to give a talk on that at the Pugwash meeting a year ago, and they wouldn't let me finish, and they didn't realize, I'm telling you guys, this is the most important thing you will hear for the next year. You better listen to this. But they cut me off. I'm still mad at them for not letting me finish what I think is a really important talk, because what was bothering me, these guys in Zurich, who came out with the estimate of 3 billion trees on the planet. 3 trillion, 3 trillion, said we need 1 more trillion trees, and they showed where they're going to happen. They say that they're not telling us to plant them there, but the implication, it seems like they're saying this is where you can plant them, go plant them. Anyway, what they're saying is it's going to be in the Arctic. Well, indeed, it's happening. In the Arctic, they are
They're growing by themselves. Thank you very much.
they're encroaching everywhere, and they have no business being there, and it's very dangerous. So these guys, the Zimovs in Siberia, have you ever come across them? They go around with their bulldozers and everything they can, knocking down trees.
I haven't heard that. That's
yeah. Good. And that what they want is to bring in big animals, because the big animals keep the soil cold by stomping on it and kicking the snow aside to get at in the winter, to get at the frozen grass and stuff. So that keeps the soil cold, and they knock over saplings so that the trees can't grow there.
Bring back the buffalo.
That's exactly what they want to do. The woolly mammoth. Bring back the woolly mammoth. It's very funny, but it's there's a guy at Harvard named Church, I think, who is trying to actually rebuild the woolly mammoth.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. And they're hoping he's going to do it in time. Not that was pretty far-fetched, but the idea of having large herds of animals living in the Arctic is not absurd. It's just take too long to do, I think.
Centuries, and we don't have them.
Well, there's another reason, and that is all these people say you mustn't have animals because they fart. You're going to create methane, burping and farting. Well, they do, but apparently that is not as big a problem as
humans. Humans are farting worse.
I don't know about that. I don't.
No, I really mean by burning the coil and the oil.
Well, we've covered the waterfront this morning, haven't we?
I think we have, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we pretty well agree on most things. That's remarkable. I always fight with everybody, but I haven't fought with you yet.
I'm amazed at this. I was expecting a fight, yeah.
What?
Yeah, I thought we would fight, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we would fight if we start talking about nuclear power, but we're not going to.
No, we won't talk about that.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate this.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye.